Hi, everyone. Welcome to our artist talk for River Cloud, Poetry and Stitch Across the Miles. My name is Jenny,
I'm Jen.
and we're very excited to have you here today to share some kind of behind the scenes about how our project came together. Okay, so River Cloud Poetry and Stitch Across the Miles is what we have called our project. And now we're going to introduce ourselves. We'll start with Jen.
Hi, I'm Jen Broemel from Indianapolis, Indiana, Midwest, United States. And I fell in love with quilting about 5 years ago and currently make heavily embroidered, colorful, I won't call them tapestries, but um, playing with texture and color and light and layers. And that's my thing.
Yeah. And I'm Jennie Johnston. I'm from just outside of Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. I've been working in textiles for a very long time, but came to the quilting medium probably 15 years ago. But it's kind of evolved over time to become what it is today. And I call these quilts mixed media quilts. So I use different hand stitching, photo transfer sometimes, paint. And I feel like I've always been connected to fabric and that type of work, but it took a while for it to manifest after art school. And yeah, that's me. All right, so we're just going to chat a little bit now about the beginnings of this project, and I'll let Jen kind of go first because it was her initiative that started this.
Yeah, so I love to play and explore away from what I would call like my main workflow. I feel like it's good for me to actually focus on the bigger works because I then have reason to step away from them. So I do have a tendency to come up with ideas outside of, and I love this idea of collaborating. Um, and it's really hard. And I love like watching other people on social media who will, reach out to people that they don't know very well and things like that. So that's kind of what happened. I think I just posted something like, who wants to collaborate? Wouldn't it be fun to, send some scraps to each other and, not make a piece together, but kind of use that back and forth. I don't remember what the original call out says because I do get a little distracted with some of the stuff. And so, gosh, God, how long ago was that? Like,
I think it was 2021.
yeah.
Yeah,
So it was a
yeah,
long time ago.
yeah, yeah. So I remember you putting out the initial. I guess maybe if we want to tell people how we met. I think we met in wearing all the hats, right?
Yeah.
Officially. So we took Wearing All the Hats course. At the time, it was part of the Artist Mother network, which has now become the Thrive Together network. And we were in the same class. And then we did some textile online meet and greets and chatting and following each other on social media. And yeah, and then Jen put the call out, seeing if anyone wanted to collaborate. And I thought that would be really fun. And so I bundled up some fabric and sent it off. And Jen did the same and bundled up some fabric and sent it off to me. So that was the kind of first initial part of the project. And I think we did start meeting, or did we start meeting right then, or was that a little bit later?
I think we did. We started kind of meeting to talk about what we were making and how it was going and what are we going to do with it and that kind of stuff.
Mm, yeah. And then during those conversations, I think that's kind of when we discovered that we were both really huge book lovers. And so we thought we would try to read books together, but then that didn't really flow very well for us. It just didn't work out for
Yeah.
our
I think
schedules.
I did not love the book that we picked. And then I'm to the point in my life where I'm just not going to do that if, if it doesn't, if I don't have to.
Yeah.
Um, just wasn't my deal. So then, yeah. So it just kind of fell away. I don't know. I feel like I did that a lot to you, but it was a beautiful thing that you allowed me to do that. And I really
Well,
appreciate it.
I mean, I think that you can have ideas, but they don't necessarily work, right? Like you think in the moment, oh, let's read books together, and then it was like too much. I think it just became too much for the moment that we were in. So um, and then at the same time, you were kind of developing some poetry projects in the different areas of your practice. And so I thought, well, I love poems and Jen loves poems. So what if we tried to do something where we're exchanging poems? And you kind of found the first one, The Way It Is by William Stafford, was kind of one that you had sent to me at some point, or you had posted about it. And there things in that kind of called to me as well, and then we went from there. And at this time I was working on a piece with the collaborative fabric. We were both in various degrees of success or not, right, with those combined fabrics. Yeah. And
And
then also,
oh, I
no,
feel
you go
like
ahead.
I definitely explored with all of those and posted, what I did. And I do think that that's what happened, is it just turned out it wasn't turning out the way. And, you only have a limited amount of the fabric to start with. And I feel like I was being so precious with it, and then kind of let go of being precious with it. And then it just didn't work out. And it just, when you're making something, you still want it to be. So that's kind of what happened with my end of the project, that it never really became anything. And I think even when we got moved ahead to this project and what we were doing, I was still trying to like integrate those scraps of the kind of mistakes that I had, or not mistakes, but the fun that I had exploring, even though they didn't work out. But so then I just, we'll get on to how it moved forward.
Yeah.
Yes, I loved,
Yeah.
at the same time that we were talking about this, I was kind of organizing my own private poetry collection of, all the little places where I've copied and kept. And just this poem is it's my favorite poem. And so I think at the same time that our project was coming together, I was realizing how much this poem means to me. So yeah, I was like, okay, yes, this is telling me, that it's more than just sharing it, the way that I normally do, and that it led it to actually inspire a whole series of pieces, really.
Absolutely. Yeah. Um, so we'll probably talk a bit more about the poems and words a bit later. But I just wanted us to touch on the way that collaboration influenced our processes of making. So for me, I try to be much more spontaneous and intuitive with my work. So I would say that my work is usually very planned, very preconceived, and I kind of plan it out in layers and things like that. Whereas with this process, inspired by Jen's process of being more intuitive, I tried to channel that part of myself. And so I was really grateful that we were collaborating, because it allowed me to sort of change my process, work more intuitively, and that really freed up some creative energy for me, and made me feel um, not still very precious about the pieces, but just more, it just flowed, which is really nice when you're doing things that are more planned, to have more flow in your work.
Well, and I think too that you have both always, but it's kind of what the poem is saying. It's like you just kind of trust where it's going to take you. I mean, that's sort of like, but the interesting thing is that I do normally work very go with the flow. And I think because I just, I think collaboration is sort of the trouble that I have with it, is sort of like, you don't want to disappoint the other person. And so I felt like, okay, if I really want to make something, I don't know, that I don't know, I was trusting where it was going and where things were leading me, but I also was like, I need to plan this out. If I'm really going to get this done the way that I thought you wanted it, not that how you wanted it to look or anything like that, but how the timeline and all that, not that we did anything quickly, but I'm like, I need to like be more organized and detailed. And so then this process that I was kind of exploring with anyway, it just dropped on me like a bomb. I'm serious. I was just like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. And then all of a sudden it's just like these doodles were, I was doing them and I'm like, oh, these doodles are telling me what it's supposed to be. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So I was kind of doodling while reading the poetry, and I mean, I doodle all the time. So anyway, it's just interesting. I think that I wasn't really thinking about how I was going to go about it. I was probably, at the beginning just thinking I would go with the flow like I normally do, but
Okay, so Poet's Thread was the first piece that I finished from our collaboration. You can see a mixture of several of the fabrics that Jen sent me in here and fabrics that I sent to her. And I also tried to use some of her layering here. So I layered some sheer fabric, excuse me, over top of the piece. And then I was thinking a lot about that William Stafford poem and the idea of a thread and poetry. I think at this point we still weren't quite at that poetry exchange. I can't remember when.
I don't think we were yet, but
yeah, I think it was coming. There was something brewing that was developing. And so it's kind of where the title came from for me, just this idea of this thread connecting us. And yeah, so that was the first piece that got finished. And now,
do you want to tell what's happened with that piece?
yeah, so that piece just came back from Stay Home Gallery in Paris, Tennessee. It was part of the Co-Create exhibit, and it was really great to be able to show there. And yeah, that's where it's been so far.
So this is my first wall piece, and it really came together, like I said, kind of like a bomb hit, really from a doodle that I was, a refinement of some doodles that I was doing while I was reading the poetry. And as you can see, I'm using like scrapped, it's kind of hard to tell, but behind the white, you can kind of see there's some layer of some scraps. So these are all pieces of scrap, quilted scrap that I had. And luckily I just had enough to make it come together. So yeah. And really this is one of a series. So you can move on to the next two are it's all kind of the same thing. These were really just kind of planned out sketches. And what's funny is what I was originally going to do was I was going to take these blocks from these wall pieces, and that was going to be the book. And then when I was started creating them, and of course, when you create them, they were in little sections. So I started collaging them, laying them out when I was not working on them. And I'm like, oh, these need to be wall pieces. So then I was like, shit, what am I going to do for my book? Because I was really excited about making a book. So it's sort of like, to me, the whole house thing and the whole idea of the project for me was about identifying, comfort. Poetry is a comfort to me. Why do I gravitate towards reading it? And the idea of home sort of became the symbol of that comfort and how I make, why I make, how my process has even sort of evolved is all sort of about following the joy in the making. And I just feel like at the time of making all this, I'm realizing all of that as well. And following the thread. I mean, it really is just such a big, it just makes so much sense. Like as a way to live your life, as a way to make your art. So yeah, so that's sort of how the series, at least, and it was an ever evolving process. I even had taken, I kind of designed them as these three quilts, and then they weren't all sewn together. And so I was even collaging, like taking some squares from one quilt and putting it with, another one. I think on Instagram, I might have laid some of those out. So it was very hard to decide how to put them together, but I did and end up kind of going back to my original. I think mainly because it was just too hard to decide. So who knows? Maybe the series will continue, because this really is like a fun way to make. And I'm always creating scraps, so I like that idea of the cycle continuing, and that's kind of what these pieces are about also, which is kind of what life is, right? You get thrown what you get thrown, and how you choose to react to that is sort of how the next steps get made. And I don't know, it's all these thoughts are happening while I'm making it and living my life.
Absolutely. So River Threads was the book that I created, and I actually wanted to shout out to Leslie Fandrich, because I believe I watched her artist talk on Thrive Together Network, and she had made a fabric book, and that's kind of where one of the first ideas of a fabric book came to my head, and I was like, oh, that's amazing. And both Jen and I love books, and because we were working with these poems, and I thought it would be amazing to just play with fabric and make a book. And it also kind of corresponded to another body of work that I was working on, where I was also making these pages and thinking about a fabric book. So for me, as we started exchanging poems, I was also really interested in rivers as subject matter. They were coming up with another piece I was working on. And so things started crossing over. I started being obsessed with this idea of finding poems with the word river in it. And then I ended up choosing lines out of the poems. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, the differences in how we use the poems as the inspiration for our works. But River Threads was the result of my pages. So we each made 12 pages, right? Yeah, 12. So that's River Threads.
So here's my book, and basically what I ended up, as I said before, I kind of used up my pages creating additional wall pieces. And so I decided to kind of recreate those blocks, because I did love the way that they looked as each block. So I didn't do all the blocks that put together. So I took, several from each of the wall pieces and recreated those and put those together. Yeah, they're just adorable. And this is like 4 inches by 4 inches, which is of course different than what we originally talked about. But I will probably be making mini quilts of these too, because they're just, and then the nice thing is you don't need to use up as much scrap making them either. And so they come together really quickly. It's just really a fun little process to do each page. And yeah.
And you ended up, I didn't include that photo in the slideshow, but you did end up kind of making an accordion style book, right?
Yes. So it's like kind of the fronts of all the blocks. And then I did end up also sewing my chosen words from the poems on the back. And they don't necessarily coordinate with the page if in physical form, but the order of them aligns.
So sweet. Okay, so while I was working on my book, I was pulling lines from the poem, several lines. I would pick one line that would work in the book, and then I wanted to continue, making something that would collaborate and I could kind of expand the idea. And so each page of the book corresponds to a panel on the River Sounds quilt, and then I ended up putting all the panels together, and it's envisioned this way, draped over a chair, because I do envision whenever this is shown in person that people will actually be able to sit in the chair and experience being
with the quilt. So there's also a sound piece that will go with this, which I didn't include here today, but you can view on the website in the exhibit. And so those would go together and be installed together. It's interesting when we're coming up with an online exhibit and how we're going to show these things when this is a very actually physical and tactile piece. So it's a little bit difficult to convey that necessarily online, but this is the first version of this that will evolve. And you can actually, if you were to look at the pages of the book, you would be able to find the corresponding panel of the quilt. There's similar fabrics that will correspond. So you would be able to go on a little treasure hunt if you wanted to connect the two pieces. Yeah, so Jen, go ahead and share how you decided to use the poems and the words.
Okay, so at about the same time that we had decided to do this, I had been working on another project, which was using sort of blackout poetry. So I was kind of in a daily exercise mode of doing that, and it was very satisfying. And so it was hard for me to let go of that, I think is what happened. And so I decided that that's what I would do. I wasn't sure exactly what I would do with the words. Would I try to make a new poem, whatever. But so, and I chose to pick 11 words because I just have this personal connection to the number 11. And it just, like I said, it's a bomb, and it just hit me. And it's just, you connect with that when that happens, and you trust that that's the way that you should go. And I'm pretty happy about how it all turned out.
Yeah. What about how you selected the poems that you were going to send? So we each selected 6 poems and exchanged them with each other. What was your process for picking your poems out?
Yeah, like I didn't really have a theme. I think what I was trying to do was, it's almost like after I realized this was my favorite poem, I'm trying to find another poem that I love as much as that. And so I always, if you go to my Instagram feed, for years I've been here and there, when I come across a poem I love, I share it. And so but I think that's what it was. It was like, okay, I'm trying to find another one that I love this much. This one's still my favorite. So that was really sort of my direction. I think too, that idea of comfort and home, and what do you want? If you were to track down and read all the poems, I think the theme that was there is, the ones that I'm attracted to are either about trusting yourself in your practice, making, creating, and or just loving on yourself, and the gift of being able to share your life, So I think that's really all that guided me. It was like I was just trying to find my favorites that I wanted to share with you.
So I think my process for selection was, as I said before, I started being obsessed with the idea of river poems, but also I associate poetry with visual descriptions. So I love very visually descriptive poetry and language. So you can, you see in the beginning of this, when "and geese fly over the dark river," like you immediately get a visual in your head of what that looks like. And so all of my poems, I think, that I sent to you were very visually stimulating. And I'm very much drawn to nature imagery, but also, I don't know, I think there was a little bit of a dark element to some of them. So it was really interesting when I was getting your poems, because they had such a different feel, and so they would, like, I would be reading them, and I would still be trying to pull those lines out that called to me, and with that same, whatever it was, the atmosphere that I was going for when I was creating these. So that was a really interesting process of pulling lines. So I would read the poem, and I would usually underline 2 to 3 lines in the poems, and then I would keep those poems. So I created a poem from the lines, the initial lines, and then there's, like I said, a whole series of lines that are included on the River Sounds piece as well. So yeah, it was interesting because I think there was a really different feel to our poems, but I think in the end we were able to still, you know, use them because you were pulling words. I think that was probably an easy way for you to use those poems, even if they didn't fit the same theme as yours.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think you can do that with any written page, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. So, yeah, so our project, what is next for our project, Jen, after our online exhibit? Do we know yet? We haven't even really discussed this that much yet.
No, we haven't. But I do remember at the very beginning, we kind of talked about like if we should invite other people to, you know, join us. And then we were like, well, we don't know what it is yet. So
Yes.
we definitely need to discuss that more. But I do think it could be really cool.
Yeah, yeah. So if any of you listening are interested in a poetry collaboration, stitching, I don't know, maybe other medium could be included as well. Let us know and we'll see if that what that evolves into in future. Did you learn anything from this process?
Of course. Don't you always learn things? What stuck out to me? I mean, I do think the whole trusting the process, which is a huge thing for me in just like everything I do. But I think that it comes from making art and identifying it first there, and then it trickles into like my parenting and the rest of my life and has been very helpful. Because this is not at all what I would have expected to end up with. But I'm really happy with it, proud of it. And I think little aspects of how this came together will move on to the next things that I make,
Mm-hmm.
That's the important part, is that you're pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone, which this did for sure. And I was still able to stay true to myself and make something that I was proud of. So.
Yeah, I think so. I think something that I probably learned was that these projects very much tie with your relationship with a person. Like it's an evolution of a relationship, and then the work just flows from that. So I think I sometimes lament, because I'm an introvert, that my connections to people is a slow process. It's not something that goes really fast and we're like best friends forever instantly. But I think because because of the way we would meet, I would say we probably met every 3 months or so, maybe. And we would just chat about our lives in general, and not be too like focused on the project, but just like chat about what was happening and evolving. Yeah, it really taught me that it's worth the work you put in, and it's worth the time, and you just have to let it evolve. Yeah, trust is a good word there.
Well, and I would say, like, at the beginning of it, it's not like we knew each other all that well. So I think it was like we just both jumped in to see what was going to happen. And so that was a good match. So
yeah. So I guess we kind of covered some advice. Do you have any other advice for anyone who's taking on a collaboration or wants to collaborate?
I mean, I think for some people, for me, it comes really hard because I do, you have your ideas, and it's easier to trust your ideas when they're just your ideas and but then when you've, made a commitment to somebody else about what you're going to do, there's this level of like coming through for them. And so I would say I have collaborated other times, and that is a struggle for me, and I continue to feel it here. But again, you push yourself through and it is totally worth it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing I'd say is to be patient with the differences in personalities. I mean, like you said, you're out of your comfort zone, you're trying something new, you're also evolving a relationship. So to be too to be too focused on the outcome and not the process is really probably not going to do you much good I think collaboration is like almost 99% process, and the result is really just cherry on the top. It's not really what you should be wanting. The movement of the working together is really the main part of the projects, in my opinion. So
I agree with that 100%. So
yeah, so just to shout out Thrive Together Network put together this initiative of taking up space. So our online exhibit is happening in May because we are participating in that initiative, which is to encourage women and non-binary artists to take up space and to put their work up and to show their work and to talk about their work. And we decided to do that in an online space, which I'm excited that I hope will be accessible to everyone who would like to see it. And we do, we hope as well that this work will be physically together and hanging together. And then maybe someday Jen and I will be in the same place and meet, and and that would be awesome too. So yeah, do you have any closing thoughts or anything else you want to share before we sign off?
no, just gratitude to you and thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's really special to be able to even to start something, even if it never would have manifested, like the fact that we were able to start and become friends and then go from there. And then the fact that we've gotten to this point where we do have a finished thing to offer is really, really special. So
It feels pretty good.
yeah. All right, so thanks so much for joining us, everyone. You can check out the exhibit at jenbroemel.com/rivercloud. And you can check us out on Instagram. And if you do feel inclined to if you have any questions or you're interested in hearing us answer questions live or anything like that, please just send us a DM on Instagram or an email, and we will try to accommodate those things. And we're so happy that you're with us today. So thank you so much.
Thank you.